Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Steph Kershaw, and I am a postdoctoral research fellow at the Matilda Centre for Research in Mental Health and Substance Use, which is located at the University of Sydney, and I'm also the project coordinator for Cracks in the Ice online toolkit. So I'd like to start by welcoming you all to this webinar. It's great that you could make time to see it. Today's presentation is one in a series of webinars which will be focused on crystal methamphetamine, or ICE, for the Australian community. And this is running as part of the Department of Health funded project Cracks in the Ice. So if you haven't already seen the website, I would encourage you to check out cracksintheice.org.au, and we welcome any feedback, questions you may have. So please feel free to get in touch with us at any time. Just to let you know, we will be recording today's session, and the recording as well as a copy of the slides will be available on the Cracks in the Ice website. Please also know that you are in listen-only mode, and that means that I can't see or hear you, but you can get in touch with us through the comment box and also the question and answer button on your dashboard. And if you think of any questions during the presentation, please do send them through the Q&A box, and we will be having a question and answer session after Brydie's presentation. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Brydie Jameson, our presenter for today. So Brydie is a Senior Project Officer at Everymind, which is a mental health institute that has been delivering evidence-based suicide prevention programs and research for a number of years. Brydie leads Alcohol and Other Drugs projects, which supports media and other stakeholders to communicate about alcohol and other drugs that isn't stigmatising and encourages help seeking. So Brydie holds a Master of Public Health and a Bachelor of Health Sciences, and she has worked in the area of social policy at both the local and global level. So I'll now hand it over to you, Brydie, to talk to us today about responsible reporting in relation to crystal methamphetamine.
Thanks, Steph. So as Steph mentioned, I am Brydie Jameson, and I am a Senior Project Officer at Everymind. And I'm going to be talking to you today about a little bit about a project that we work on called Mindframe for Alcohol and Other Drugs, and some information that sits within that project called, which is best practice media reporting of crystal methamphetamine. I'd first like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm presenting this webinar for you today, the Awabakal people, and for the traditional owners of all the land that you are sitting with today, from wherever you're tuning in. I'd like to pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge the voice of lived experience and all the work that we do here at Everymind, but also particularly within this project, and particularly in the space of alcohol and other drugs. The voice of lived experience has contributed significantly to the project work we do here at Everymind and on Mindframe, and that's a really important element of our work. So as Steph mentioned, I work for an institute called Everymind, and we're a leading national institute in Australia. We're dedicated to reducing mental ill health, reducing suicide, and improving wellbeing for all Australians. We've been doing this work for about 25 years, and we were formerly known as the Hunter Institute of Mental Health. And we rebranded a couple of years ago to better reflect the work that we do. Most of the work that we do is on the national level, and we are based in Newcastle, New South Wales. So what am I going to run through today? So I'm going to provide a little bit of an introduction into what Mindframe for Alcohol and Other Drugs is, and also Mindframe as well. We'll talk a little bit about the current portrayal of media reporting on crystal methamphetamine in Australia. We'll then go into the impact of this reporting on people who use crystal methamphetamine, their families, as well as the broader community. And then I'll talk a little bit about some guidelines and how you can report in a way that is helpful. At the end, there'll be some time for questions, and then we'll have a little bit of time for some self-care as well. So what is Mindframe for Alcohol and Other Drugs? So in 2017, the Australian Department of Health commissioned Mindframe to scope and develop media guidelines for communicating about alcohol and other drugs. Now, Mindframe was asked to do this because for about over 20 years, Mindframe has been delivering a project which supports the media and to communicate safely about suicide and mental health. The Mindframe has had great success in changing the behaviour of the media reporting around those issues in Australia. So that's why we were asked to do this piece of work. So Mindframe for alcohol and other drugs is a set of core guidelines for communicating about alcohol and other drugs. And the way that these guidelines were developed was from evidence and research-informed information, as well as a consultation with key stakeholders around Australia working in the AOD space, but also working in the media space, the mental health space, and university journalism educator space as well. Now, the aim of Mindframe for alcohol and other drugs and the purpose of the project is to collaborate with the media and other stakeholders to communicate safely, respectfully and responsibly about AOD, and aim to positively influence the quality of media reporting around AOD issues to improve community attitudes towards people living with AOD issues in the community, and increase help-seeking behaviour and improve people's general understanding of issues related to alcohol and other drugs. Now, these guidelines are available on our website and they look like this, and they're available in a PDF download, which I'll give you the website at the end of the presentation. So what we're doing today is we're focusing specifically on reporting on crystal methamphetamine. So why we've got guidelines for reporting, on general drug use, and alcohol use, but why are we focusing on crystal methamphetamine? So there's a high level of discrimination and stigma associated with crystal methamphetamine, and this is probably more so than for any other drug in Australia. And so that's the reason we're focusing on this particular drug. Stigma and discrimination not only affects the person using the drug, but also their families, friends, and communities. So we're going to have a look at a little poll now, and we're going to bring up and ask you how you feel and how you think that what the portrayal of crystal methamphetamine is currently looks like in the Australian media.
Great, thanks Brydie. So I've just launched the poll. So the question is, how do you think crystal methamphetamine is currently portrayed in the Australian media? And your three choices are: accurately, Australia is in the middle of an ice epidemic, in a way that creates moral panic, or in a way that is disproportionate to the current state of the issue. So I'll just give everyone a few seconds to vote. Okay. Last chance, make your vote count. All right, I'm going to close it now and share the results. So here you go, Brydie.
Okay.
So people, the most voted option was in a way that creates moral panic, closely followed by in a way that is disproportionate to the current state of the issue.
Wonderful. Now, with that question, there wasn't a right or wrong answer, but just something to sort of have a think about before we move into the rest of the content of this thing, of this presentation. So have a think about that poll as we move along, and have a think about what your answer was, and see if it changes over time following the presentation. So the way that crystal methamphetamine is reported in the media at the moment is, it's not always, but it's often reported in a way that is alarmist, contributes to moral panic, is disproportionate to, in disproportion to the actual issue, in a way that portrays people using methamphetamine as immoral, a strong focus on methamphetamine as a crime. I use methamphetamine use as a crime, and we often see a lot of emotive language. Now, Mindframe is not saying that crystal methamphetamine should not be reported in the media. It's a very important issue of public interest and a public health issue to be discussed, but it's really important to be mindful of the impact that reporting in a particular way can have on people who are using methamphetamine as well as their families. So the potential impact of reporting in this way is that media is often the primary source of information for the community and the public regarding methamphetamine. So therefore it's really important that it needs to be accurate and helpful information. Media sensationalism may be shaping public perceptions and concern people about the scope and magnitude of the problem associated with crystal methamphetamine. Reporting in this way can contribute to stigma and negative community attitudes about people who use the drug, and which in turn can then decrease help-seeking behaviour. So if you're a person who is using crystal methamphetamine and you are seeing that the community attitudes and the way that you're portrayed in mass media is that you're someone with that is immoral for using this particular drug, you're less likely to put up your hand and say, hey, this is something that I need help for, or this is something I want help for. Alarmist media representations can initiate spontaneous policy reactions, and these can be detrimental, can have detrimental consequences as well. As I said before, we really, we're not discouraging the media to be reporting on crystal methamphetamine, and that we understand that the media has a really important role to play in raising awareness about this issue as a public health issue and a prevention behaviour. And there's ways in which you can report to talk about the issue in a way that's helpful. So what we want to happen out of this is we want to promote a better understanding around methamphetamine use and the issue within Australia. We wanted to reduce stigma associated with crystal methamphetamine use, and we want to promote help-seeking behaviour. And so by doing this and encouraging people to report in a way that encourages this type of outcome, we can then intervene early and help increase help-seeking behaviour from people that need it. Now, there's some common myths that we see that are often portrayed or that are sort of community attitudes around crystal methamphetamine. Now, this is a card that Mindframe has made in collaboration with the Cracks in the Ice team, and it will be available for download on our website soon. So a big myth that we often see is that Australia is in the grip of an ice epidemic. This is a big one that we often see on the front of newspaper articles or in big headlines. Although the effects of crystal methamphetamine can be serious, it's far less common than other illicit substances such as marijuana and ecstasy. And I think the last drug household survey, it was only about 0.8% of the population were using crystal methamphetamine at the time, and there hadn't actually been much of an increase since 2013. So in terms of using that word, epidemic, it's not really representative of what the actual situation is in Australia, and it can be misleading and cause that sort of alarmist reaction from the public. It's impossible to recover from crystal methamphetamine dependence. While it can be challenging, it's important to portray an accurate depiction of recovery, and that there are many services available to those who want to seek help or need to seek help for their drug use. And portraying this in media representations normalises that concept and will support people to seek those services. This is a really big one. So crystal methamphetamine will cause psychosis and violence in all people. Most people who use crystal meth, use this drug, will not experience those traits, and that that's only a potential side effect. So it's really important to make sure that, if that is information that you are communicating about, that, that it's explained that that is not the norm, and that that is not something that everyone who uses this drug will experience. So it's, once again, it's that providing context behind, particular situations. If you try crystal methamphetamine once, you're hooked. That's not the case in everyone. Crystal methamphetamine can become dependent, but not everyone that uses the drug is dependent on it. People who use crystal methamphetamine differ in appearance to others in the community. The fact is that people who use crystal methamphetamine don't look different to other people in the community, and portraying that they do can be very stigmatising towards people who are using the drug. People using crystal methamphetamine never want treatment. People who do use this drug access treatment, and particularly when it is in the format that works for them and targets some of those factors that led to them using the particular drug. Now, these are some common myths associated with crystal methamphetamine, and if you are reporting on this drug, Mindframe encourages anyone that is communicating about it to reach out to experts in this field, and to go to websites like the Cracks in the Ice website, where you can access up-to-date information, or get in contact with someone from that organisation that can provide you with that information and that really important context behind this drug. So when you are reporting about the drug, remember, if you're reporting about a person who has a lived experience of drug use, of methamphetamine drug use, that they are a person as well. So if you're reporting about a person, try to use person-centered language. Instead of, a person is a person before they are their drug use, and it's really important to remember that. So a person isn't just an ice addict. So, instead of using this language, you can describe someone who is the person who uses crystal methamphetamine, or a person who uses drugs. That person might be a professional, they might be a brother, they might be a son, they might be a father, they might be a mother. So it's really important that you don't just describe them just as their drug use. Presenting all people who use this drug as delinquent, psychotic and violent, as we mentioned before, is inaccurate, and it can lead to further stigma and reduce people from seeking help. Drug use for a lot of people is a really sensitive issue, so remember that the way in which a person who uses this drug is portrayed can impact their lives as well as the lives of their families and significant others. So it's really important that if you are speaking with someone when you're reporting on this drug and they're a person with lived experience, you make sure that what you are portraying, that they are okay with, that they understand, and they have full knowledge of what the information is that you are putting out there about them publicly, that they have supports in place for this information, and they're comfortable for this information to be put out there. A way of making sure that someone is in a good space to be sharing their story is that they might already have experience of sharing their story publicly, or they also may be linked in with a lived experience group. And we're happy at Mindframe to support you to be able to contact people from lived experience groups who might have a better understanding of sharing their story. So as I mentioned before, there are helpful ways that you can report on methamphetamine in the media, and that can reduce the stigma associated with this drug, but also increase information and understanding for the public around this drug. So when you are reporting report in the context of the prevalence of other drugs, so such as cannabis, MDMA, cocaine, alcohol, and tobacco. The harm of one drug does not disappear with the emergence or the increased use of the other. You would think at the moment that that crystal methamphetamine is the most harmful drug in Australia. However, we know that research shows us that alcohol and tobacco are still causing the most disease and the most deaths for people, for Australians. Crystal methamphetamine use is a public health issue, and it's really important that media portrayals reflect this. So the easiest way to achieve this is to report on this issue as you would any other health condition. So, for example, the way that you report on someone that may be living with, another, diabetes or another health issue, you wouldn't necessarily stigmatise them because of that issue that they're experiencing. So remember that when you are writing about this issue or reporting on it. Portray dependence as a treatable condition. With treatment and support, recovery from dependence is possible, and this can contribute to improved understanding amongst people, amongst the community, as well as family members and people who are experiencing a dependence themselves, and reduce stigma around the issue. So there are some particular ways that you can report on crystal methamphetamine use that can be harmful to people that use the drug or their families. So reporting in a way that encourages panic can increase stigma and discrimination and prevent people from seeking help. So, for example, using the terms ICE, epidemic, meth heads, psychos, it perpetuates stigma. So use information or language that is neutral, and we'll talk a little bit more about language in a second. Sensationalizing negative facts about crystal methamphetamine or selectively reporting about the drug's prevalence or effects at the expense of accuracy can result in public worry. So make sure that your facts and statistics, you provide context, and you get in touch with someone that has a understanding of those statistics and has that understanding of that context as well behind what that report is. Statistics and particularly rates on their own can paint a pretty grim picture sometimes, and it's not always often what the story is that is being told by those rates. So I'd really suggest getting in touch with someone who has a really in-depth understanding of that report before you report on it. Avoid inaccurate or stereotypical or stigmatizing images and descriptions of people who use this drug. So, for example, meth mouth or before and after photos. People with a lived experience of crystal methamphetamine use have communicated that this is one of the most stigmatizing, one of the most things that they find stigmatizing is images, and they're used, I guess, in a way, to try and demonstrate to people that, maybe if you do use this drug, that you might end up having this situation or look in a particular way. But it is very stigmatizing towards people who are using the drug. And as we mentioned before, it is very rare and it's not helpful. So language. So when you are reporting or communicating about crystal methamphetamine use, it's important to remember that language can impact how people perceive themselves and how others view them. Inaccurate use of language and terminology can be stigmatizing for people who use this drug, and it can prevent them from seeking help. So we've got some examples on the left, and then we've got examples on the right that you can use that we prefer people that would prefer for people not to be used. So for example, the big one is crystal methamphetamine use, ice abuse, ice misuse, problem. Ice use would be terms that would prefer not to be used. a person who uses crystal methamphetamine instead of ice user or ice abuse. So I won't go through all those now, but this will be available on our website for download as well eventually. So the only thing I will say in regards to this is to respect the language used by people with lived experience to describe their personal experience and their personal drug use. Language in this space is constantly evolving, and that it's important to be respectful of that and have an understanding of the language in this space. I will say one thing though is that you will notice that all the terms on the left-hand side that are the preferred terms, they're very neutral, non-emotive language, and they support you to tell the story and the facts behind what is actually occurring, whereas the information on the right is quite emotive, sensationalist, and can be very stigmatising. So we at Mindframe, we really encourage any communications or any reporting around AOD issues and crystal methamphetamine, and to include help-seeking information. This is the help-seeking card, which will be available on our website for download soon. At the top there, we've got the National Alcohol and Other Drugs Hotline, which is a hotline funded by the Australian Department of Health, and it is a 24/7 hotline everywhere in Australia except for South Australia, which I think runs from 8 through till 10 p.m. Someone correct me if I'm not right in the comments box. And what you can do is you can call up that line and you'll be put through to counsellors as well as local supports in your area. We've also got some other options there, some online resources, so counselling online, which is another option that you can go online and have a look at some counselling, online counselling. Then Cracks in the Ice also have a page where you can go and have a look at some of the help that you might need. And then you've got some state-based options as well. So one of the really important things about putting this help-seeking information at the bottom is that if people are affected by some of the content that is in your report or your piece of media, they can go and access that information. But it also, and that help that they need, but it is also, it normalises help-seeking behaviour. It has that information there about what it is that you're reporting on, but then it's also that information at the bottom saying, okay, you know what, it's normal for people to go and seek help for this issue if they need it. So this is just some examples of some communications we found that were really helpful to the issue and were in line with sort of the guidelines that we've put out. So this one here on the right was just some information about the Commissioner Dan Howard, who was attending Groove in the Mood to have a look at the pill testing trial sites there in ACT as before they started the inquiry into the drug ice in New South Wales. And so it was just a report, I think it was from The Guardian, and it was just outlining the process and what the visit looked like and what the purpose of the visit was. And then over on the left, we have, I think it was from the Sydney Morning Herald, we had an article where it was basically about the New South Wales Premier launching the inquiry in New South Wales, the recent inquiry that's happening at the moment. And what the story was, it was just basically just a report on when it's been launched, why it's been launched, who's involved in the launch, and it really focused on the facts. The only issue we found with this report was some of the quotes made by a police officer had some stigmatising language in it. And so what Mindframe actually does is we work quite closely with the police to support the police to have an understanding around communicating around these issues as well. And so it demonstrates that, you know, while particularly as a journalist you can't go and you can't change direct quotes, it's important to have people who are speaking with the media to have an understanding of this information as well, and why it's important to have a grasp of this information. Now, this is a video, and this was a inquiry. This was a video of a news report from Northern New South Wales about the inquiry into I think it was at the Lismore hearings for the National Ice Inquiry, the New South Wales Ice Inquiry, sorry. And it's just a good demonstration of some information that is really helpful to promote people to seek help, but also to promote a better understanding for the general public around some of the issues regarding stigma. So I'm going to try and play that, fingers crossed it works. Ooh.
Crystal methamphetamine has ravaged regional Australia over the past decade. After a peak in 2016, ice was declined before rising again in 2018. The Special Commission of Inquiry into Drug Ice is visiting different regional areas to learn how to better manage the issue. The final day of this document is also the inquiry learned about how stigma is preventing stakeholders from getting on top of the problem. Violent or dangerous prevents people from seeking help, perpetuating the cycle.
So if I go to the emergency department, intervention, here the stigma and discrimination that concerns me because there's no one else to know.
Doctors involved in treating substance abuse also face stigma, possibly leading to shortfalling of mental workers.
Many of us work with people in terms of you work with those sorts of people. So let me back line that.
Health workers calling for compassion is a treat drug dependence social health issue.
And they're those of the vulnerable forms of their lives are concerned, yet they're seen as something of the system.
The hearing will next visit Nara at the end of the month. Brian Curran, Francis.
So that story, you know, was some information that came up in the ICE inquiry that's been delivered, and it's communicating some of the barriers behind, you know, what it is that is discouraging people from seeking help. So, you know, provides that understanding around a particular issue, and there wasn't really anything in there that was, you know, too stigmatising towards people who are using the drug. Now, this is just some more sort of problematic representations or examples of media reporting. So just the one on the thing, we've got, you know, the word of the use junkie, and then there is kind of a bit of a joke there made about the high end of town, you know, saying that there is a drug junkie den meters from Parliament. It is also having, you know, has that kind of connotation that, you know, that people who are representative of Parliament are not, you know, less and more important than people who are experiencing drug dependence or problems with drug use. Over here in this web article, we've got, you know, a full coverage, Australia's war on ice. It's that use of that combative language as opposed to understanding that it is a public health issue and we need to be looking at it as a public health issue. And then over here, there is, you know, that information about in that use of that word epidemic. I will say under here, I haven't read the article, but how ice use affects families and what they can do. that is, that is potentially some really great information in there, and that, that's the kind of information you want to be putting out into the community and to people as well, so they can have that understanding of it. Now, I will say that Mindframe and Cracks in the Ice have been working together over the last little while on a resource, and they've collaborated to produce a resource where a lot of the information from today has come from. The resource will be for reporting on crystal methamphetamine, and it will be ready and it will be released in a couple of weeks, so it's in that sort of review stage at the moment. So this resource is to be used, as I mentioned, alongside the Mindframe for alcohol and other drug guidelines, and it will sit up on our website for people to download. We'll also make sure, and I'll have a chat with Steph, for everyone that has accessed this webinar today, for them to also access that information and to for it to be sent out to you via email. Our resources are available at our website, which is www.mindframe.org.au. And if you go and you click on there and you go to alcohol and other drugs, there'll be a suite of our resources there that you can access. I would just like to say thank you for listening to this webinar today. And if you want to get in contact with Mindframe, we are on Twitter at Mindframe Media, and our email address is health.newsouthwales.gov.au.
Great, thank you so much, Brydie. That was a really informative presentation with some great tips about how to report more responsibly about crystal methamphetamine. You can tell it's lunchtime, my voice has stopped working. So did I see in an earlier slide that you not only have guidelines for drugs and alcohol, but for other sensitive subjects?
Yeah, so I think, so it's roughly about 20 years we've been working, Mindframe's been working in the space of guidelines for media reporting. We initially started in doing the media reporting guidelines for reporting on suicide in Australia, as well as mental health. So we've been doing that for about 20 years, and we're actually we carried out a media monitoring study on the effectiveness of the implementation and dissemination of those guidelines. And what we actually saw was an increase in media reporting around the issues regarding suicide and mental illness. And we also saw an increase in quality from about 60% to 75%.
Wow.
Media reporting around suicide. So yeah, that's why we've been sort of asked to do this work, and because we sort of have that experience and that background.
Cool. And are they also free guidelines which can be downloaded at any time from your website?
Yeah, so they are available on our website as well, and we also do training nationally. So if that is something that other people are interested in, please get in touch with us and we can help you out with that as well.
Great. So I did receive a message from one of the attendees who just wanted to let us know that in South Australia, ADIS, the hotline is open every day from 8:30 a.m. till 10 p.m.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
No worries. So one of the other questions that has come through was that the media has sort of been more around that moral panic and alarmist language. How do we change that now? Like, how do we start that dialogue and move towards a more neutral and inclusive reporting?
Yeah, and so part of the Mindframe for Alcohol and Other Drugs project is that we'll be engaging with the media in Australia. So Mindframe has a very strong relationship with media organisations in Australia, and we'll be engaging with the media to build the capacity and that understanding. This hasn't been done before in Australia, and so for the media to be, reporting in a way that they've been doing for to automatically change the way that they're reporting that they've been doing for so long, it's kind of a bit. It's not going to happen. So we need to, educate and build people's understanding and capacity around why it's important to report in a particular way, and we'll start to see that change then. So we'll be engaging with media, and we'll be supporting them and training them in the guidelines and how to implement the guidelines into their work. When we meet with media organisations and we meet with journalists, they don't want to do harm. It's more of just that, not really understanding why it's important to report in a particular way and who could be affected by that reporting.
Yeah, so I noticed that you said that families were one of the groups that could be affected by this. And so one of the participants of today's webinar was wondering if there's any particular initiatives that are happening to support families who have been affected or feel stigmatised by crystal methamphetamine. So I do know that on Cracks on the Ice we link out to the family drug support network, and we also have a family and friends support program for families who have been affected by crystal methamphetamine in particular. And so those are free resources that can be accessed at any time. Is there any others that you know of, Brydie, that are particularly for families, or there's an initiative about how to help families seek support when they feel stigmatised?
Not that I'm aware of. I think the ones that you mentioned, Steph, particularly on the Cracks on the Ice website, as well as family drug support, are available. The national hotline is also available for people for families who are experiencing issues related to AOD, to drug issues. In terms of being affected by stigma, that's a tricky one, and I'm not sure if I'm the best person to answer that. But there, I think it is important for us to continue to be able to remind people that stigmatizing people in a particular way because of their drug use, it is harmful, and sort of championing that message is really important.
Yeah, okay, that's great. One other question that's come through is, you mentioned engaging with people with lived experience and how important that is in developing guidelines and knowing what's an appropriate way to talk about things and not. Do you find that people are willing to engage with you, people with lived experience, or do you find it difficult because of some of the alarmist reporting that's around? Do they feel like they can share their story in a way that will be represented properly?
Yeah, and so what we would recommend is that if someone with a lived experience came to us and wanted to tell their story, we would get in touch with a lived experience group, so such as it's ABLE, I think, is the Australian one of the Australian lived experience groups that can, is a lived experience sort of network and supports people with lived experience. We would be encouraging that person to, get in touch with the lived experience group to sort of attain that support before they go and tell their story. And if someone from the media did get in touch with us regarding speaking with someone with a lived experience, likewise, we'd be encouraging them to access one of the lived experience networks that is established and has that information, and they are the experts in that information.
Yeah. Okay, great. I don't have any other questions that have come through. So I guess we'll get to find out what you want to talk about in terms of self-care.
Self-care. So I just wanted to, a really important part of Mindframe is that we want to encourage everyone to look after themselves and to practice self-care. Issues related to mental health, to suicide, to drug and alcohol, they can be sensitive issues and they can affect people in different ways. So we just want to practice what I preach, and encourage you all to look after yourself. Do something nice for yourself this afternoon. You've taken your lunch breaks to listen to me, so do something nice for yourself this afternoon when you get home from work. And if you are experiencing anything that you think that you might need help for, please reach out to one of our services in Australia, or have a chat to someone that you trust.
Okay, that's great. So thank you again, Brydie, for your fantastic presentation, and I hope that people found it useful. So for those of you who don't know, we do have a Cracks in the Ice app, which is available in the App Store and Google Play, and you can download that, and it allows you to access information even when you're offline. So it's great for people in rural and remote communities. You can also keep up to date with any upcoming webinars or just general information by following us on social media, as well as subscribing to our email list. So thank you all again for attending today. I hope you really enjoyed it. I know I did. And we'll have to think about those self-care strategies and what we can do, not only to look after ourselves, but to support other people. Thank you again, Brydie, and we will be holding more webinars this year, so please do keep an eye out for those. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.